If a man can publicly humiliate the woman he once vowed to love forever, then how powerful must she become to not just survive, but to make him witness her greatest triumph? Friday nights in New York City have a pulse all their own, a kind of electric hum that runs through every glowing window, every cab, every whispered conversation behind closed doors. But inside the gold-lit walls of Amaretto, the city's most exclusive restaurant, that hum was about to explode into something unforgettable. Amaretto was the sort of place where billionaires could disappear, where the ultra-rich went not just to eat, but to be seen, to show off, to make a statement. Everything inside glittered, from the hand-blown glass chandeliers to the silverware, polished until you could see your own reflection. Tonight, the place buzzed with a special energy. Word had gotten out. Lincoln Davis, one of Manhattan's youngest and boldest tech tycoons, was celebrating a massive business win. His face had been splashed across business magazines for years, his company the kind of overnight success that had people whispering genius and lucky bastard in the same breath. But tonight, Lincoln wasn't with his wife. He was seated at the best table, right under the biggest chandelier, his arm draped around Ruth, a woman who practically glowed with ambition and hunger, her eyes scanning the room for anyone watching. Lincoln laughed louder than he needed to. He ordered a third bottle of Dom Perignon, ignoring the price and the whispers from neighboring tables. For him, tonight was about victory, about showing the world that he was untouchable. The entire restaurant seemed to orbit around his table, even as waiters in starched jackets floated by with tiny plates of caviar and truffle risotto. Ruth leaned in close, her hand on Lincoln's knee, whispering jokes meant only for him, but loud enough that everyone could see their intimacy. She wanted to be noticed, to be envied. But as Lincoln soaked up the attention, he didn't notice the way the maître d' suddenly froze at the entrance. He didn't see the sharp intake of breath, the quick scan of the guest list. The maître d', a man who prided himself on knowing every face in the city's power circles, stood a little taller as the restaurant's heavy doors swung open. That's when the air changed. A hush swept across the dining room, so swift and absolute that even the orchestra's music seemed to hesitate. The door had opened to reveal a woman who walked not with arrogance, but with a quiet, understated confidence that drew every gaze. Her name was Harper Elise Montgomery, Lincoln's ex-wife. She didn't need diamonds or a designer gown to command attention. Her presence alone did that. She wore a deep navy dress, simple but perfectly tailored, her hair swept back to reveal the gentle curve of her cheek and the unmistakable glow of pregnancy. People didn't just look, they stared. Not because Harper was loud or flamboyant, but because there was something magnetic about the way she held herself, a strength and serenity that seemed almost unshakable. She wasn't alone either. Walking at her side was another man, someone most people in the room recognized immediately, even if they'd only seen his face in the financial news. August Drake, the billionaire investor who could make or break entire industries with a single phone call. Tall, imposing, with a reputation for never appearing in public unless there was a reason, August guided Harper with a subtle protectiveness, his hand hovering just behind her back. Lincoln's laughter died in his throat the moment he saw them. At first he tried to play it cool, forcing a smile, squeezing Ruth's hand a little tighter. But he couldn't stop himself from staring. The woman he'd once dismissed, the wife he'd taken for granted, was now the center of attention. And the man with her? That was enough to make even Lincoln Davis nervous. All around the room, the whispers began. Some recognized Harper from old society photos, others from charity events. But most people only knew her as the ex, the woman Lincoln had left behind in pursuit of someone younger, flashier, less complicated. Yet tonight, as Harper took her seat at a candle-lit corner table, it was clear that she was anything but left behind. Meanwhile, at table 6, Ruth's lips curled into a slight sneer. She squeezed Lincoln's hand a little too tightly. "Well, isn't that your ex?" she murmured, her voice dripping with mock innocence. "And she's pregnant. Cute." Lincoln felt a wave of embarrassment, but quickly tried to mask it. "Doesn't matter," he said, but the words rang hollow, even to him. What neither Ruth nor Lincoln realized was that tonight's dinner was about to become something much more than a celebration. It was about to become the scene of a reckoning. Because even as the appetizers arrived, tiny towers of crab and avocado, foie gras and brioche, August Drake was whispering to Harper. His eyes never left hers, his voice low and serious. And then, in a moment that seemed almost surreal, August dropped to one knee. All conversation in the restaurant died. Every head turned. Ruth's mouth fell open in shock. Lincoln's hands went numb. August pulled a small velvet box from his jacket. Inside, a diamond that caught every flicker of candlelight and scattered it across the room. "Harper," he said, his voice resonant and clear enough for every guest to hear. "I know we haven't known each other long in years, but I feel like I've waited my whole life to meet you. Will you marry me? Will you let me love you, protect you, and raise your child as my own?" Silence. Total, breathtaking silence. Harper's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness but of gratitude and astonishment. She nodded and the room erupted. People applauded, some stood, a few even cried. Ruth was frozen, her expression twisted in disbelief. And Lincoln felt the world tilt beneath him. The woman he had once called his own was being given the kind of love, respect, and future he had never even thought to offer. For a long moment, it was as if the city itself paused. In the most exclusive room, on the most exclusive night, the most exclusive offer had just been made. Not to a socialite, not to an heiress, but to a woman who had once been told she wasn't enough. And as the applause swelled and Harper said yes, Lincoln finally understood. Some victories are worth more than money, and some losses will haunt you forever. Before the flashbulbs, before the billionaire proposal, and before her ex-husband's public humiliation, Harper Elise Montgomery was a woman most people overlooked. That's how it had always been, ever since her childhood in the small Rust Belt town of Fairmont, Pennsylvania. Life there was tough, the air thick with the smell of steel and the weight of dreams deferred. Her mother, Angela, worked the late shift at the only diner in town. Her father had disappeared before Harper could even remember his face. It was just her and her mother, scraping by, fighting for every extra dollar, saving for a future that always seemed one step away. From an early age, Harper learned to make herself useful. She helped out at the diner, did her homework behind the counter, and listened to her mother's whispered encouragements after midnight. "Don't let them tell you who you are, Harper," her mother used to say, squeezing her hand tight. "You get to decide." It was that voice, soft, strong, and unwavering, that stayed with Harper even as the world tried to press her into a mold she never quite fit. School was Harper's escape. She was bright, so bright that some teachers took notice, nudging her toward honors classes, writing letters of recommendation, and suggesting college as a way out. She earned scholarships, studied late into the night, and finally, at 18, packed everything she owned into the trunk of a rusted-out sedan and drove to New York City. The city overwhelmed her at first. The endless noise, the crowds, the sheer scale of ambition on every street. But Harper was determined not to be swallowed up. She enrolled at NYU, majoring in nonprofit management and urban policy. She worked 2 jobs, barista by dawn, office assistant by dusk, never missing a single payment, never letting herself quit. It was in New York that she met Lincoln Davis. At the time, he wasn't the business mogul he would become. He was still hungry, still gentle, still humble enough to laugh at his own mistakes. They met at a charity fundraiser, both awkwardly holding plastic cups of punch, both feeling a little out of place. There was an instant connection, real, raw, and disarming. Harper loved the way Lincoln listened to her, how he made her feel seen in a city where everyone was just trying to be noticed. They dated for 2 years, working their way up from tiny apartments and microwave dinners to a modest wedding at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. The first few years of their marriage were filled with hope. Harper took a job at a children's advocacy nonprofit. Lincoln started his tech company, burning the candle at both ends to get it off the ground. Money was tight, but their dreams were big. When Lincoln's company finally took off, the world changed overnight. Suddenly, they had money, more than either of them could have imagined. They moved into a high-rise apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows, took vacations in places Harper had only read about, and were invited to events she'd never dared to dream of attending. But with every dollar, every accolade, something between them began to crack. Lincoln started staying later at the office, attending endless networking events. He began speaking in numbers, in deals, in ambition. He hired a stylist, a personal trainer, started coming home with expensive watches, new cologne. Harper tried to keep up, tried to mold herself into the kind of wife the city expected. She went to galas and charity events, wore designer dresses borrowed from stylists, forced herself to smile for cameras. But the more she tried to fit in, the more invisible she felt. Their fights started small, about missed dinners, about Lincoln's late nights, about the sense that he was slipping away. Lincoln would brush off her concerns. "This is how it is at the top," he'd say. "We have everything, Harper. Why can't you just be happy?" But Harper knew money couldn't buy peace. She began to feel like a supporting actress in her own marriage, there to decorate the life Lincoln was building, never to shape it herself. The final blow came in the most humiliating way possible. Harper discovered the truth, not through confession, but through whispers and rumors, then undeniable evidence. Lincoln's affair with Ruth was not only real, but it was being paraded around the city's social circles. What hurt most wasn't the cheating, but the ease with which Lincoln let her go. One night, he came home late, the scent of Ruth's perfume lingering on his suit. He didn't even try to hide it. He simply told Harper it was over, that he needed someone who matched his ambition, and that she'd always be too sensitive for his world. That night, Harper packed her things and left the penthouse with nothing but her pride and a single suitcase. She moved into a small apartment in Brooklyn, lived off her savings, and tried to piece her life back together. The tabloids wrote about her as the discarded wife, speculating on her next move, some even mocking her for her plain looks and lack of sophistication. She blocked out the noise, focusing on herself and the tiny new life growing inside her. A baby she'd discovered only days after Lincoln threw her out. Motherhood changed everything. Harper poured herself into her work, volunteering at community centers, eventually landing a consulting job at a nonprofit venture capital fund. She built her own support network, drawing close to people who valued her for her kindness, her intelligence, and her tenacity. She never let Lincoln's betrayal define her. Instead, she let it refine her, pushing her to become stronger, braver, and more independent than ever before. When August Drake, a legend in the world of finance, but also a deeply private, deeply principled man, approached her to lead a new initiative for women entrepreneurs, she said yes, not just for the paycheck, but because she wanted to prove to herself that she could stand on her own. August saw something in Harper that most people missed: resilience, vision, empathy. He admired her work, then her heart, and before long, their connection deepened. By the time of the fateful dinner at Amaretto, Harper was no longer the woman Lincoln had once left behind. She was a mother-to-be, a rising leader in her field, and a woman whose scars had turned to armor. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone, not even herself. She had survived heartbreak, humiliation, and loss. She had chosen to love again, and most importantly, she had chosen herself. So when August knelt at her side in the middle of the restaurant, offering her not just a ring, but a new beginning, Harper accepted, not as a victim, but as a survivor. The world saw her finally, not as the ex, but as the woman who had the last, best laugh. Amaretto wasn't just a restaurant. It was an institution, an unspoken citadel of the Manhattan elite. You couldn't just make a reservation. You had to be someone. You had to have a story. Every detail was engineered to dazzle and intimidate, from the moment you stepped out of your black car onto the velvet carpet until you left, slightly dazed from the dizzying cocktails and the sharper-edged conversation. For the select few who entered Amaretto's double doors, it was never just about food. It was about being seen. It was about staking your claim to a world that chewed up the weak and spat them onto the sidewalk. The entryway itself was a statement. Gleaming onyx floors, so polished they were almost a mirror, stretched out beneath feet clad in only the finest Italian leather. Massive gold leaf columns lined the hall, leading guests toward a forest of white tablecloths and candlelight. The maitre d', Felix, was legendary. A man who remembered your favorite drink, your ex's new lover, and the fact that you hated being seated near the kitchen. His raised eyebrow could ruin your evening. His subtle nod could make you a star. Tonight, Felix wore his most inscrutable poker face, but even he was watching the unfolding drama with interest. The lighting at Amaretto was soft and flattering, designed to erase a decade of stress lines from the city's most powerful faces. Every table was a private island, draped in imported Irish linen, each set with crystal and fine-boned china that gleamed under the low chandeliers. In the corner, a quartet played jazz standards, their notes drifting like smoke over the quiet chatter of hedge fund managers, old money matriarchs, and the city's newest self-made millionaires. Waiters glided between the tables, carrying silver trays with barely a sound. But tonight, beneath the surface glamour, an undercurrent of anticipation rippled through the room. People had heard Lincoln Davis would be here, fresh off the cover of Forbes, and still basking in the afterglow of a record-breaking IPO. Some had come hoping to catch a glimpse of Ruth, the it girl who had replaced Harper in his life, her rise as sharp and scandalous as a plot twist in a soap opera. The regulars were there too, sipping $400 wine, trading gossip, and placing quiet bets on who would flame out in this season's social games. In the center of it all sat Lincoln and Ruth. Their table, positioned under the largest chandelier, was like a stage set for a play nobody wanted to admit they were watching. Lincoln, dressed in his signature navy suit and crisp white shirt, looked every inch the conquering hero. He laughed loudly, greeted guests as they passed, and ordered bottle after bottle of champagne. Ruth, perched beside him in a scarlet dress that seemed almost engineered for envy, played her part to perfection. Her laugh was just a touch too bright, her hand just a shade too possessive as it rested on Lincoln's arm. She knew the cameras would catch every gesture, and she wanted every woman in the room to know that she'd won. The staff watched from the sidelines, discreet but alert. They'd seen their share of drama at Amaretto, but something about tonight felt different. The kitchen buzzed with the usual chaos. Chefs barking orders in 3 languages, trays of oysters and Wagyu steak sent out with military precision. In the back, a new server nervously polished glasses, hoping to avoid the wrath of the famously exacting Felix. "Big night," he whispered to a colleague, glancing toward the main dining room. "Feels like something's about to happen." He wasn't wrong. Harper's arrival had shifted the energy instantly. She wasn't loud or ostentatious, she simply belonged, and somehow that was the greatest power move of all. Her table, tucked into a corner but visible to everyone, became a gravitational center. Guests who claimed not to care about old drama found their eyes wandering in her direction. Who was the tall, distinguished man with her? Some recognized August Drake, others only felt the weight of his presence. But everyone, absolutely everyone, sensed that this was no ordinary dinner. From her table, Harper could feel the stares. It was a strange reversal. For so long, she had been the invisible woman, the one who faded into the wallpaper while Lincoln played king. Now she sat tall, every movement deliberate, her hand resting gently on her belly. She felt the warmth of August's attention, the comfort of his presence. She also felt a kind of power she'd never known, the power of being utterly unashamed of who she was and who she'd become. August watched her with a steady gaze. He didn't touch her in the flashy, possessive way Ruth clung to Lincoln. Instead, he leaned in to ask what she wanted for dinner, listened closely to her answer, and smiled like she was the only person in the room. He was a man used to commanding boardrooms, shaping fortunes, turning down presidents. Yet here, in the soft candlelight, all of his focus was on Harper. Her comfort, her happiness, her story. At Lincoln's table, the mood had shifted. The laughter grew forced, the conversation shallower. Lincoln tried to ignore Harper, but the truth gnawed at him. How could she look so at ease? Why wasn't she devastated, furious, trying to claw back what she'd lost? For a moment, he watched the way August leaned toward her, the way Harper smiled softly in response. Lincoln felt something sour twist in his chest. He'd spent months telling himself he'd traded up, that Ruth was a prize, that Harper was too soft for his world. Yet tonight, under the scrutiny of the city's elite, he felt exposed. Ruth, sensing his distraction, squeezed his hand. "Don't let her get to you," she whispered. "She's nothing." But even Ruth's voice sounded small. She glanced over at Harper, caught the easy grace with which she sipped her water, and felt a sharp edge of insecurity. For all her confidence, Ruth couldn't help but wonder, had Lincoln really moved on, or was he just pretending? Around the room, the atmosphere thickened. The group of venture capitalists paused their conversation, watching Harper and August with open curiosity. An actress whispered to her producer, "Isn't that Lincoln's ex? She looks amazing." Waiters exchanged glances as they refilled glasses. Even Felix, unflappable as ever, lingered a little longer by Harper's table, offering a rare smile. The night stretched on. Courses arrived: lobster ravioli, truffle risotto, rare steaks paired with rare wines. Toasts were made, photos snapped, more than a few secrets traded beneath the hum of the quartet. Through it all, Harper remained poised, refusing to shrink or apologize. She knew she didn't have to perform. She was simply, finally, enough. By the time August reached into his pocket for the velvet box, everyone was watching. The stage was set, the spotlight waiting. And Amaretto, for all its glitter and spectacle, had never seen a show quite like this. Lincoln Davis was the kind of man who didn't just want to win, he needed everyone to see him winning. From his earliest days, he'd been told that the world belonged to men who took risks, who pushed harder, who wanted it more than anyone else. He was the son of a construction foreman and a school secretary from upstate New York. Smart, ambitious, but always outside the velvet ropes. He watched the city from a distance as a teenager, vowing one day to make it his own. He hustled for scholarships, skipped meals to save subway fare, and slept 4 hours a night just to graduate at the top of his class at Columbia. That hunger never went away. In college, Lincoln was the guy who could charm a professor and close a deal in the same breath. He worked every angle, made the right friends, and turned internships into job offers. And then, with a single brilliant idea, turned those jobs into an empire. By 30, he was the CEO of Davis Innovations, a tech company whose apps changed the way the city moved, shopped, and spent. He was celebrated on magazine covers, courted by investors, and invited to every exclusive event in New York. But with every rung he climbed, something shifted inside him. He started believing his own hype. He told himself he was special, unstoppable, deserving of more, always more. He hired image consultants, personal trainers, and a publicist who made sure no one ever saw him sweat. He collected luxury, cars, watches, penthouse views, as if the right accessories could erase the scars of his childhood. He married Harper because she was steady, loyal, and saw the good in him when he barely saw it in himself. But as the money came in, Lincoln wanted more than loyalty. He wanted adoration. Lincoln's world was ruled by image. He cultivated his public persona like a prized garden, always manicured, never a leaf out of place. But private Lincoln was different. In the boardroom, he was feared for his quick mind and quicker temper. He demanded absolute loyalty, rewarded ruthlessly, and fired people for a single misstep. At home, his intensity curdled into impatience. He wanted things his way. Dinners ready, smiles unwavering, no questions asked. He'd learned that power was fragile, and he guarded it with suspicion. He checked Harper's phone. He tracked his employees' social media. He hated being surprised. As his company exploded in value, so did his ego. Lincoln's friends, what few he kept, noticed the change. He stopped returning calls. He missed birthdays and anniversaries. He began speaking in press release language, describing even private moments as on brand. He justified it all as necessary. "You think Elon Musk ever takes a day off?" he'd say when Harper asked for a weekend away. "If you want the life, you live with the sacrifices." He convinced himself Harper was holding him back. She still shopped at local boutiques instead of designer showrooms, still called her mom every Sunday, still volunteered at soup kitchens. Lincoln saw her humility as weakness, a liability for a man with ambitions like his. He wanted a partner who'd dazzle in front of cameras, who could trade quips with CEOs and models. So when Ruth appeared, a woman who glowed in the spotlight and loved to be seen, Lincoln was seduced by her confidence. Ruth made him feel younger, sharper, more alive. The affair began as a thrill, a secret victory. Ruth was 28, brilliant, unapologetic, the marketing director at a rival firm. She'd grown up in LA, survived on her own since 16, and treated every room like it was already hers. She saw Lincoln not just as a lover, but as a career move, a man to conquer. They met in luxury hotel bars, on business trips to Paris and Tokyo, in penthouse suites with city views. At first, Lincoln kept Harper and Ruth on separate tracks. But the more he had Ruth, the more he resented Harper. It wasn't enough to win. he needed Harper to know she'd lost. When Lincoln finally ended things with Harper, he was cold, even cruel. He told himself he was being honest, that he was doing her a favor. He never expected her to fight back, to challenge him. He assumed she'd retreat, that she'd fade into the background like so many others he'd stepped over. For Lincoln, winning wasn't just about what you gained, it was about what you made others lose. But Lincoln underestimated Harper's resilience, and the city never truly forgets a public betrayal. Even as Ruth slid into Harper's place, something shifted. The press began to circle, reporters sniffing for cracks in Lincoln's golden boy image. Old friends distanced themselves. Investors started asking tougher questions. Harper's absence wasn't just personal, it became a problem for Lincoln's brand. The devoted husband persona was gone, replaced by whispers of scandal. At first, Lincoln ignored it. He doubled down on business, threw bigger parties, bought louder toys, but the harder he tried to outrun the fallout, the more it followed him. Ruth was demanding. Her ambitions didn't stop with being his girlfriend. She wanted more, always more. A ring, a stake in his company, a seat at the table. And when Lincoln hesitated, she reminded him of how quickly fortunes can change in this city. "Don't forget who really made you, baby," she'd whisper, a knife wrapped in velvet. The night at Amaretto was supposed to be a victory lap, a way for Lincoln to show the world he was still on top, still the man everyone wanted to be. But as soon as Harper walked in with August Drake, Lincoln felt his world tilt. He couldn't look away, couldn't enjoy Ruth's laughter or the congratulations from other guests. He saw Harper's confidence, the way people gravitated toward her, and it gnawed at him. He drank too much, said too little, and for the first time in years felt truly out of control. Ruth noticed, and the tension between them sharpened. "She's just trying to make you jealous," Ruth hissed. "Don't let her win." But Lincoln knew it was deeper than that. For the first time he wondered if maybe, just maybe, he hadn't won at all. As the room buzzed and August reached for the ring, Lincoln's hands trembled. For years he'd believed he was the star of the show, the master of every room he entered. But now, under the unflinching lights of Amaretto and the eyes of everyone who mattered, Lincoln realized the truth. Power could be fleeting, love could be lost, and sometimes your greatest enemy was the ghost of the person you used to be. The night at Amaretto was meant to be Lincoln's victory parade. But as the evening unfolded, the energy in the room twisted into something electric and dangerous. By the time dessert was served, every guest in the restaurant could sense that something extraordinary was about to happen. The anticipation was thick as the signature dessert, a chocolate sphere melting under a cascade of flaming cognac, arrived at each table. Even the quartet seemed to play softer, as if their music didn't want to miss a word of what was coming. Lincoln's table, so vibrant an hour before, now buzzed with a quiet, almost nervous tension. Ruth picked at her dessert, eyes darting toward Harper's table, while Lincoln sat stiff, swirling the remnants of his brandy, but barely tasting it. His laughter had dried up, replaced by tight smiles and distracted nods. The people around them, other tech founders, socialites, editors, and even a minor celebrity or two, could sense the shift. The spotlight was no longer on Lincoln. It was following Harper. Across the room, Harper looked almost serene, her posture relaxed, her laughter light as August Drake leaned close to whisper something in her ear. The billionaire had a way of commanding attention without trying, and tonight the world's eyes seemed to rest on him and her. For so long, Harper had felt invisible at events like this, just another accessory on Lincoln's arm. Tonight she was her own sun, radiating a quiet, irresistible strength. The first hint of public spectacle came not from Lincoln, but from Ruth. Maybe it was the champagne, maybe it was months of living in Harper's shadow, maybe it was the realization that even with Lincoln on her arm, she hadn't won. Whatever the reason, Ruth decided to strike. She stood abruptly, her red dress catching the candlelight, and glided toward Harper's table with a forced, dazzling smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Harper! What a surprise!" Ruth's voice rang a bit too loudly, ensuring everyone nearby could hear. "I have to say you look radiant. Pregnancy suits you, I suppose." The room stilled. Some diners pretended not to listen, but their forks hovered midair. Harper, never one to rise to a bait, smiled back calmly. "Thank you, Ruth. I hope you're enjoying your evening." "Oh, I am," Ruth replied, her eyes flickering to August. Looks like you found yourself a nice upgrade. August didn't flinch. In fact, he smiled. One of those slow, intimidating billionaire smiles. It's funny you say that, Ruth. I was just telling Harper she's the real reason I came out tonight. I don't normally attend these things, but for her, I'd clear my entire calendar. Ruth, stung, tried to laugh it off, but her voice was brittle. Isn't it odd, though, Lincoln? She called over her shoulder, waving to him. All those years you spent trying to build her up, and now look at her, glowing because of someone else's money. That was all Lincoln could take. He stood, napkin tumbling to the floor, face flushed with anger and embarrassment. That's enough, Ruth, he said, but his voice didn't have its usual authority. Instead of supporting him, the crowd seemed almost amused. A few phones even rose discreetly, recording what was quickly turning into a scene. The staff exchanged wary looks. Scandal was bad for business, but tonight, even Felix, the maitre d', wasn't sure who was in charge. Harper looked at Lincoln, really looked at him, as if seeing him for the first time in years. She didn't see the man she'd once loved, or even the one who'd betrayed her. She saw a man terrified of losing everything, desperate for approval, grasping at control. She could almost pity him. August, seeing the moment, gently stood beside Harper. Is there a problem, Lincoln? He asked, calm but commanding. Because from where I'm standing, it seems like you should be congratulating Harper. She's about to have a baby, and tonight, she's about to have a whole new future. Suddenly, the room went quieter. People realized this wasn't just gossip. Something monumental was about to happen. Then, as if on cue, August reached into his jacket and took out a small velvet box. Harper, he said, lowering himself to one knee right in the middle of Amaretto. I know we've both had our share of heartbreak, but I also know I've never met anyone braver, kinder, or more worthy of love. I want to spend my life with you. Will you marry me? A gasp rippled through the room. Lincoln, speechless, could only stare as the man he could never hope to outshine made a public declaration that dwarfed every business deal, every accomplishment, every calculated victory Lincoln had ever chased. Harper, caught off guard but moved to tears, nodded. Yes, she whispered, her voice trembling. Yes, I will. The restaurant erupted. Applause broke out, genuine and loud. Some diners even stood, clapping. Felix, the maitre d', stepped forward with a champagne toast. August slipped the dazzling ring onto Harper's finger, and she beamed with a happiness that was impossible to fake. And Lincoln felt the world spin. The phones were out now, flashes lighting up the table as social media influencers, business reporters, and even the kitchen staff caught the moment. In real time, the story was spreading. Billionaire proposes to pregnant ex-wife of tech mogul at his own celebration dinner. Ruth, mortified, melted into the background, her ambitions for the night forgotten. The power had shifted. In less than 5 minutes, everything Lincoln thought he controlled, his reputation, his narrative, his future, was gone, handed to the woman he'd once called too soft. And for the first time, Lincoln realized that he wasn't the story's hero, or even its villain. He was just a lesson. That night, Harper's proposal was all over the news before dessert plates were cleared. Photos of her radiant face, August on his knee, Lincoln standing alone in the background, humiliated, defeated, exposed, flooded every social feed. And even as Harper quietly slipped out of the restaurant on August's arm, Lincoln sat at his table, alone, staring at the life he'd built and wondering how it all fell apart. For the world, Harper's acceptance of August's proposal was the perfect ending to a public humiliation. Her victory, Lincoln's defeat, a viral fairy tale. But the truth, as always, was far messier. Behind the headlines, behind the flood of congratulatory texts and calls, behind the outpouring of support on social media, Harper Montgomery was falling apart. The hours after that proposal were a blur. August's driver whisked them away from Amaretto's back entrance, paparazzi still calling her name. She tried to muster a smile, to seem grateful, to absorb the overwhelming rush of good wishes pouring into her phone. It all felt surreal. The ring on her finger sparkled with promise, but her heart felt heavy, knotted with exhaustion and confusion. In the dark of the limo, August squeezed her hand gently. "You okay?" he asked, voice soft, eyes searching her face for cracks. Harper tried to answer, but her voice caught in her throat. Her mind spun with images, the flash of cameras, the shock on Lincoln's face, Ruth's shrill laughter, the hush before August knelt down, the applause, the storm of attention that followed. For the first time in months, she wanted nothing more than to disappear. August, sensing her unraveling, let the silence stretch. "We don't have to do anything you don't want," he murmured, his tone laced with understanding. "We can go home. We can go anywhere." Home. The word ached. Harper's home used to be the penthouse she'd shared with Lincoln, now just another memory carved out by betrayal. Her Brooklyn apartment, filled with thrift store furniture and the scent of lavender, felt safer, but small and lonely. The world had celebrated her triumph, but Harper only felt empty. They arrived at her apartment building, and August insisted on escorting her upstairs. The street outside was quiet, but she knew the city was buzzing with her name. She closed the door behind them, kicked off her shoes, and collapsed onto the couch, finally letting the tears fall. It wasn't just the events of the night, the spectacle, the ring, the proposal. It was months, years, of holding it together, of trying to be enough, of pushing through heartbreak after heartbreak. Now, when the world thought she was winning, she just felt so tired. August sat beside her, not saying a word. He knew that sometimes presence mattered more than advice. Harper clung to a pillow, knees pulled tight to her chest. "Everyone thinks I'm this hero now," she said finally, voice shaky. "They don't know I almost fainted at the table. They don't know how scared I was." "You're allowed to be scared," August said softly. Harper shook her head. "I spent so long trying not to cry, trying to be strong for everyone, for Lincoln, for the press, for the baby. And now all I want to do is scream." August nodded, gently reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "You don't have to be strong all the time. Not with me." She let out a shuddering breath. "What if I'm making a mistake? What if I'm just running away from my pain and straight into something new, just because it's easier than being alone?" August's eyes softened, full of empathy, not wounded pride. "You're not running, Harper. You're surviving. You're making choices. That's real strength, even if it feels like falling apart." But that night, after August left and the city fell quiet, Harper's doubts multiplied. Alone in her bedroom, she stared at the ring, feeling the full weight of everything she'd lost and gained. She thought of her baby growing inside her, and the future she now had to build. One that didn't fit any of the neat narratives playing out in the headlines. Sleep wouldn't come. Her mind replayed the dinner at Amaretto in excruciating detail. Ruth's taunts, Lincoln's broken expression, the way the entire restaurant seemed to watch her every move. Had she really wanted this attention? Did she want the life August was offering? Or was she just desperate for something to fill the void Lincoln had left? These questions clawed at her, keeping her awake as the city buzzed outside. The next morning, she woke with swollen eyes and a pounding headache. The world hadn't paused for her pain. Reporters camped outside her building. Social media trended with her name, "Harper wins, from housewife to billionaire bride." But nobody saw the mess behind the headlines. Her phone overflowed with messages. Old friends, distant family, journalists, even strangers sharing their own stories of heartbreak and rebirth. She read a few, then tossed the phone aside. The baby kicked, as if reminding her of what mattered. Harper pressed a hand to her belly and let herself cry again, softer, quieter this time. The tears were different now, less about Lincoln, more about the fear of failing herself and her child. What if she wasn't strong enough for all of this? What if she let August down? What if she let her baby down? The anxiety spiraled. She skipped breakfast, unable to keep food down, pacing her small living room until her feet ached. A call from her mother's number went unanswered. When August texted to check in, she waited hours before replying with a simple, "I'm okay." She wasn't. She was lost. By the afternoon, Harper reached her breaking point. She stood in front of her bathroom mirror, barely recognizing her own reflection. Gone was the woman in the perfect dress, beaming at the restaurant. In her place was someone raw and real. Eyes red, hair tangled, shoulders slumped under invisible weights. She splashed cold water on her face, gripping the edges of the sink. "You have to get it together," she whispered to herself, voice trembling. "For the baby. For you." But she couldn't do it alone. And that realization, that even the strongest women need help, was the first crack of hope breaking through the wall of despair. Harper called her therapist, booking an emergency session. She texted her mother back, asking her to come over. She told August she needed time, not to end things, but to understand herself before she could share her life with anyone else. That night, surrounded by takeout containers and the quiet hum of city lights, Harper let herself grieve, not just Lincoln, but the life she'd dreamed of, the woman she'd tried so hard to be. She cried for the girl who had loved with her whole heart, for the wife who wasn't enough, for the mother-to-be who was still afraid. Only then, as the tears faded, did she feel a spark of something new, something that might just be the beginning of her real comeback. For days after the infamous amaretto dinner, the world spun with stories of Harper. The heartbroken wife turned billionaire's fiancée, the ordinary girl who'd landed on her feet. She was everywhere. Morning news shows, social media feeds, gossip columns. To most people, her rise looked like a stroke of impossible luck. But what nobody knew, not the reporters, not the curious neighbors, not even Lincoln, was that Harper's greatest strength was still hidden. It began with a letter, hand-delivered, slipped under her door early one morning as the city was still blinking itself awake. The envelope was heavy, the kind you feel before you see. Harper opened it slowly, expecting more press requests or a generic congratulations. Instead, she found a note in neat handwriting. Ms. Montgomery, please contact me at your earliest convenience. We have urgent business to discuss regarding your late grandmother's estate. Samuel Lynn, Lynn & Associates. Harper's heart skipped. Her grandmother, Evelyn Montgomery, had died almost a decade ago. They'd been close when Harper was a child, before family money turned to dust and memories, and before Harper's mother lost the last of the family home in Fairmont. She barely remembered those years, just snippets. The feeling of sunlight in her grandmother's rose garden, the faint scent of lavender and old paper. The estate had always been a myth, something grown-ups whispered about before the bank took it all. Harper, practical and grounded, never counted on family secrets. But curiosity tugged her out of bed. She dialed the number, and within an hour, Samuel Lynn, a precise, serious man in a charcoal suit, was sitting in her living room. He carried a battered leather briefcase and the kind of gravity that said he'd done this 1,000 times. Miss Montgomery, first let me offer my congratulations, he began, nodding to the engagement ring. But I'm here for another reason. Your grandmother's will included a trust. Until now, the assets have been held under certain legal conditions, specifically until you reached the age of 30 or until a major life change deemed appropriate by her executors. Harper blinked, unsure if she was hearing right. I don't understand. My mother said there was nothing left. Lynn smiled gently. Your mother never knew the full story. Your grandmother was a private woman. She wanted you to have a chance at a real life, one built on your own merit. But she also wanted to make sure you'd be protected if you ever needed it. When news of your engagement and pregnancy made headlines, the conditions of the trust were triggered. He opened the briefcase, laying out documents and ledgers. You are now the sole beneficiary of the Montgomery Family Trust. The assets include stocks, real estate, art, and a controlling stake in Montgomery Holdings, a company you may not know but which holds patents and real estate across several states. In total, the estate is valued at... He slid a page forward, the number circled in blue ink. Harper's breath caught. $87 million. She sat back, stunned, words dissolving on her tongue. This can't be right. It is, Lynn confirmed, and it's yours as soon as you sign these papers. Harper laughed, a shaky, unbelieving sound. All these years I've been scraping by, hustling, working 2 jobs, and... Your grandmother wanted you to become your own woman. She also wanted you to know, when the time was right, that you were never powerless. In that moment, something inside Harper shifted. The world had always seen her as the underdog, the woman who got lucky because a billionaire fell in love with her. But the truth was, Harper had always had power. She just never relied on it. She realized, maybe for the first time, that she wasn't surviving on luck. She had a legacy, a foundation, and a future she could control. Lynn left the documents with her, urging her to take her time. As soon as he was gone, Harper collapsed onto her couch in tears. This time, tears of relief and gratitude, of wonder and release. All the nights she'd lain awake, worrying about rent, about groceries, about how she'd take care of her baby, they all melted away. But the twist didn't end there. As word trickled out to her inner circle, her mother, her best friend Marissa, even her therapist, Harper began to see how this new chapter wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming her narrative. She didn't have to settle for anyone's definition of her life. Not Lincoln's, not the city's, not the press's. And suddenly, the news was out. Not because Harper bragged, but because the business world started connecting the dots. Montgomery Holdings appoints new CEO, Harper Montgomery. Heir to forgotten fortune breaks silence. Old colleagues reached out, shocked. So did reporters, this time asking about her vision, her plans. No one could dismiss her as just a billionaire's fiancée or a tabloid headline anymore. August, too, was floored when he heard the news. When he came to visit her that night, she met him at the door, not with tears, but with a smile. "I have to show you something," she said, placing the trust documents on the kitchen table. "Turns out, my family had a few surprises left." August read through the papers, his eyes widening. "Harper, this changes everything." She shook her head. "Not everything. I'm still me. But now, I'm not starting from scratch, and I'm not depending on anyone's charity or protection, not even yours." He reached for her hand, pride shining in his gaze. "That's exactly why I fell in love with you." For the first time in a long while, Harper felt the heavy chains of insecurity start to fall away. She was more than a survivor. She was a builder, a leader, an inheritor of a powerful legacy. The world thought they'd seen her transformation when she said yes to August at Amaretto. But that was just the beginning. This was her twist. This was her power. By the next morning, Harper had a new agenda, her own. She was done living in reaction to other people's choices. She was ready to fight for her future on her terms, with a strength no one would ever doubt again. The twist had been set in motion, but what Harper did next shocked even those who thought they knew her best. The revelation of her inheritance, the trust, the company, it all could have been just another story of a woman lucky enough to be born into old money. But Harper wasn't interested in living anyone else's narrative. She'd spent enough of her life shrinking herself, apologizing for her ambition, letting others shape her future. Now, for the first time, she was ready to own every part of her life, her motherhood, her heartbreak, and her future. It started with a makeover, but not the superficial kind. Yes, there was the stylist, a woman named Dominique, who Harper found through her nonprofit work. Dominique had dressed senators and CEOs, but she listened to Harper with a humility that made her different. "We're not making you someone else," Dominique said, measuring Harper's shoulders for a new blazer. "We're showing the world the Harper you've always been, the Harper you've hidden." Together, they curated a new wardrobe. Tailored dresses, elegant but understated jewelry, power shoes that could survive a Manhattan boardroom or a Brooklyn playground. But the real transformation began inside. Harper booked sessions with her therapist, not to erase the scars of the past, but to honor them. She asked herself hard questions about love, self-worth, and what she wanted for her child. She allowed herself to rest for the first time in years, sleeping in on rainy mornings, eating breakfast without checking her phone, breathing deeply with her hands on her belly as her baby rolled and kicked in comfort. Harper's friends and family rallied around her. Marissa, her oldest friend, came over to celebrate with bagels and flowers, laughing and crying over the wild turns of fate. Harper's mother, Angela, showed up with childhood photo albums and a box of old love letters from Harper's grandmother. "You're not just carrying your baby, honey," Angela told her, squeezing her hand. "You're carrying every strong woman who came before you. Don't ever forget that." The media attention shifted too. At first, the press hounded her for sound bites about August and Lincoln. But when news of her role at Montgomery Holdings broke, the headlines changed. Suddenly, Harper was the mystery heiress, the next boardroom powerhouse, the single mother redefining what it means to have it all. She gave exactly 2 interviews, one for a women's business magazine, one for a nonprofit podcast, speaking not about scandal, but about her mission to invest in other women-led startups, to use her influence for something greater than revenge. Public perception swung sharply in her favor. Even her former critics admitted her poise and candor were refreshing. At events, she walked with her head high, not as someone's ex, not as someone's fiancée, but as her own woman. She began accepting invitations to galas and business conferences, not to be seen, but to build her network, her legacy. In one memorable appearance, she took the stage at a leadership summit, addressing an audience of young women who hung on her every word. "My story isn't a fairy tale," Harper told them. "I'm not a princess who was rescued. I'm a woman who rescued herself, who learned that pain doesn't have to define you unless you let it. Power isn't about money or revenge. It's about standing up, even when it feels impossible, and deciding what kind of life you want to live." Meanwhile, Lincoln watched her transformation from afar, and it ate at him. He tried to move on, threw himself into work, posted photos of him and Ruth in tropical locations, bought a new sports car. But the city's attention had shifted. Business partners who used to call him first now reached out to Harper for her opinion. Old friends from Colombia, ones he'd ghosted, sent her congratulations. Ruth grew increasingly resentful, questioning why Lincoln seemed obsessed with his ex's every move. "She's gone, Lincoln," Ruth snapped one morning, tossing a tabloid on the table. "Why can't you let her go?" He didn't have an answer. Harper, on the other hand, found herself letting go of Lincoln's ghost with each passing day. The bitterness faded, replaced by a clear-eyed gratitude for the lessons he'd taught her, the good and the painful. August respected her need for space, supporting her without suffocating. He became her confidant, her friend, her partner in planning a future that wasn't defined by his billions or her last name, but by their shared vision. And then came the physical glow-up, the one the world couldn't ignore. Harper's pregnancy only made her more radiant, her skin glowing, her smile softer but stronger. Dominique styled her for her first public appearance as CEO, a deep emerald dress perfectly draped over her bump, with a matching silk coat and classic pumps. She arrived at Montgomery Holdings' new office flanked by her team, shaking hands with staff, fielding questions from nervous board members. She didn't raise her voice, didn't posture. She simply listened, made decisions, and led by example. Within weeks, company morale soared. Employees who'd once dreaded board meetings now volunteered ideas. Harper launched an initiative for parental leave and announced a fund for minority-owned startups. She held regular coffee chats with staff, learning their names, their stories, their dreams. "You don't have to choose between family and ambition," she told her leadership team. "We're building a place where you can have both." Her social media quietly shifted from posed, polished images to real moments. Her laughing with her team, holding hands with her mother, attending prenatal yoga, reading children's books aloud to her belly. Fans, especially women, flooded her inbox with messages of hope, gratitude, and shared struggle. One afternoon, as she walked through the city in the golden haze of autumn, Harper caught her reflection in a shop window. She barely recognized herself, not because she'd changed beyond measure, but because she finally saw the person she'd been fighting to become. She was proud, unashamed, and deeply alive. The city that once whispered about her heartbreak now watched in awe as she became a symbol of resilience. Journalists no longer asked about Lincoln or August. They wanted her thoughts on economic opportunity, on motherhood and leadership, on what it meant to be brave in the face of loss. As the weeks sped toward the annual gala, this time with Harper as a keynote speaker and August as her honored guest, the stage was set for her final, public victory. She was ready, not for revenge, but for revelation. The glow-up was complete, but Harper knew the best was still to come. The night of the Bright Futures Gala arrived with all the electricity and spectacle the city could muster. It was the social event of the year, a gathering of New York's elite, business titans, celebrities, philanthropists, and the press. A place where legacies were cemented and scandals were whispered into crystal glasses. For weeks, the buzz had centered around one question: would Harper Montgomery appear, and if so, how? The venue was the grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Plaza, lit like a dream. 1,000 lilies perfumed the air. Photographers swarmed outside, hungry for shots of the city's power players. Lincoln Davis arrived with Ruth on his arm, both dressed to impress and determined to steal the spotlight back. Ruth wore a shimmering gold dress, her hair swept up in perfect waves, but there was a nervous tension in her smile. Lincoln, for all his bravado, felt it too. He told himself that tonight would be his chance to reclaim his narrative, to show everyone, including Harper, that he was still the king of the city. Inside, the event unfolded in a whirl of introductions, speeches, and champagne. Lincoln and Ruth worked the room, posing for photos and fielding hollow congratulations. But a strange hush fell as Harper's name was whispered down the marble staircase. Every head turned. Every conversation paused. Harper entered the ballroom on August Drake's arm. The crowd parted instinctively. Tonight she wore midnight blue, the color of possibility and power. Her posture was regal, her baby bump visible but embraced, not hidden. Her team flanked her, board members, friends, her mother and Marissa, each a testament to the support and success she'd built around herself. As they approached the dais, Lincoln's confidence faltered. He tried to hold Ruth close, but her eyes tracked Harper, both anxious and awestruck. People he once called friends drifted from his orbit, eager to shake Harper's hand, to congratulate her on the new CEO role, her philanthropy, her engagement. Lincoln felt the room shift, the power he once wielded now in someone else's hands. Then came the true moment of reckoning, the awards ceremony. As the MC announced Harper as the gala's guest of honor and keynote speaker, a gasp rippled through the crowd. Lincoln stared, disbelieving. This was his territory, his event, yet here was Harper standing at the very center, welcomed like royalty. Harper took the stage with a calm that radiated outwards. She didn't gloat or seek revenge in the conventional sense. Instead, her voice carried dignity and humility. "Thank you," she began, "not just for this honor, but for the chance to share my story, the truth, not the headlines. I stand before you as a woman who has lost, who has loved, and who has rebuilt. Tonight isn't about my pain or even my comeback. It's about what we can all do with our second chances." She spoke of her nonprofit work, of using the Montgomery legacy to invest in underprivileged youth, especially girls who'd been told, "You're not enough." She announced a new multi-million-dollar fund for women entrepreneurs, pledging half her own fortune to seed it. The crowd erupted in applause. Even reporters wiped their eyes. For once, the city's elite looked past money and scandal and saw real courage. As Harper left the podium, August met her with a proud smile. In that moment, she knew she'd taken back control of her life. Not with bitterness, but with vision. But the final twist was still to come. The auction, a highlight of the gala, was next. Lincoln had donated a rare luxury car, expecting it to be the centerpiece. But when the auctioneer called for the most anticipated lot, it wasn't Lincoln's car at all. It was a one-on-one mentorship lunch with Harper Montgomery, new CEO and philanthropist. The bidding started modestly, then soared. Venture capitalists, celebrities, even rival CEOs clamored for the chance to learn from her. When the hammer finally fell at a record-breaking bid, Lincoln's face was pale. Ruth squeezed his hand, but he could feel her slipping away too, her eyes drawn to the magnetic woman at the center of it all. After the event, Lincoln tried to catch Harper as she mingled with supporters. When he finally approached her, the press followed, hoping for fireworks. "Harper," he said, voice low, "I just want to say, I'm sorry for everything." She turned to him, her gaze steady, her smile kind but unyielding. "Thank you, Lincoln. I hope you find what you're looking for." She didn't add more, didn't need to. Her forgiveness was not for his comfort, but for her own peace. Ruth, left beside Lincoln, stared after Harper. The envy in her eyes was mixed with reluctant admiration. She knew now that Harper's strength came not from any man's love, but from her own resilience. Ruth would remember that long after the gold of her dress faded. The night ended with reporters crowding Harper, not for gossip, but for wisdom. As she and August left the ballroom, her friends, her mother, and her new colleagues beside her, Harper felt the city's eyes on her, not as a victim or even as a survivor, but as a woman who had rewritten her own destiny. Lincoln, once the master of the room, stood in the shadow of the exit, learning the hardest lesson of all. The true measure of power isn't how many people you control, but how many you lift up when you finally stand tall. In that glittering ballroom, as the city's elite applauded Harper's grace, a new narrative was written. This wasn't a story of revenge, but of reclamation. As the lights dimmed on the Bright Futures Gala and the city settled back into its restless rhythm, Harper Montgomery's story lingered in the air, not as gossip or scandal, but as a beacon of hope. Her journey, marked by heartbreak, betrayal, and unimaginable transformation, was a powerful reminder that strength is not born from perfection, but forged through resilience. Harper's path was a testament to the truth that many women already knew deep in their bones. Life is rarely fair, and sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. But those wounds do not define us. What defines us is how we rise from them. For years, Harper had been underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed. She had been the other woman, the discarded wife, the pregnant ex, but she refused to let those labels cage her spirit. Instead, she chose to rewrite her story, not by revenge, but by reclaiming her power with grace, intelligence, and unwavering courage. Her message to every woman watching or listening is simple. You are not weak because you have fallen. You are not broken because you have been betrayed. You are powerful because you have the strength to stand back up, to rebuild, and to shine on your own terms. Harper's journey shows us that success is not just about money or titles. It's about finding your voice after it's been silenced, about building a life that honors your true self, and about lifting others as you rise. The generosity she showed in dedicating her fortune to empower other women is a call to action. Success is sweetest when it's shared. In a world that often pits women against each other, Harper's story reminds us that solidarity and support are revolutionary acts. The friends, family, and mentors who stood by her played a crucial role in her comeback. Their belief in her gave her the courage to believe in herself. This is a lesson for us all. When women support women, incredible things happen. Harper's transformation was also a powerful lesson in self-love and forgiveness. She didn't spend her victory gloating or tearing down those who hurt her. Instead, she chose compassion and dignity, recognizing that forgiveness is not for others, but a gift we give ourselves to move forward without the weight of bitterness. Her story urges every woman to embrace her complexities, the fears, the failures, the scars, and see them as the foundation for growth. It challenges us to reject the false narratives society often imposes, and to define success on our own terms. For those who have been hurt by betrayal or loss, Harper's example offers hope. It shows that from the ashes of heartbreak, you can build a new life filled with purpose, joy, and love. It encourages women to seek help when needed, to prioritize mental health, and to never feel ashamed of vulnerability. Moreover, Harper's journey is a call to recognize the power of financial independence. Her inheritance was not just a windfall, but a tool she wielded with wisdom and responsibility. It underscores the importance of education, smart financial planning, and the courage to step into leadership roles traditionally dominated by others. As the new CEO of Montgomery Holdings and a prominent philanthropist, Harper now uses her platform to amplify voices that have been silenced and to create opportunities where none existed. She embodies the modern woman, complex, ambitious, compassionate, and unapologetically herself. Her story is far from over. As she prepares to welcome her child into a world she is actively shaping, Harper is not only building a legacy for herself, but for the generations of women who will follow. Her life is a living testament to the idea that no matter where you start, with resilience and determination, you can change the course of your destiny. For women watching this story unfold, let it be a source of inspiration and strength. You are capable of incredible things. You deserve love, respect, and happiness, not just as a dream, but as your reality. Don't be afraid to walk away from what no longer serves you, and don't be afraid to fight for the life you deserve. In the end, Harper's story is a celebration of the human spirit's capacity to heal and grow. It's a reminder that we are more than the sum of our hardships. We are architects of our futures, writers of our stories, and warriors of our own battles. So to every woman out there who has felt invisible, unworthy, or defeated, remember Harper Montgomery. Remember that your power lies within you, waiting to be unleashed. Stand tall, speak your truth, and never let anyone else's actions dictate your worth. Because in the story of life, you are the author, and the next chapter is yours to write. So the story has ended, and here we are. Wonderful friends, are you still here with me? If you really stayed until now, that means something in this story touched your heart, didn't it? Maybe it reminded you of a time you felt broken, betrayed, or underestimated. But remember, like Harper, you have the power to rewrite your story. As the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche said, that which does not kill us makes us stronger. Healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means growing beyond the pain and choosing to shine anyway. Life will throw its hardest punches, but your strength isn't just in surviving. It's in rising, reclaiming your power, and building the life you deserve. If this story inspired you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Let's keep lifting each other up through stories that remind us we are never alone. Comment below what touched you most, and join this community of warriors, rewriting their futures every day.